Okay, welcome to our April satsang gathering of 2021. Today's theme is the Sanskrit language, and it's a vast topic. Sanskrit is the language, the mother language of most of the languages of the Indian subcontinent and Southeast Asia. It's one of the few languages in the world that has 500,000 words of vocabulary, the other two definitely being German, English, and there might be a fourth, but it is a massive language. It is a live language. People speak it. My brother speaks it. So it's not just contained with books, and it's not just for the history shelf, and it's having a big rebound these days as the popularity of yoga grows from country to country. My mom was watching a documentary the other day on the Philadelphia Orchestra and them introducing Beethoven, the fifth of Beethoven, to China. They went to China back in the early 90s. It was one of the first trips, and they performed at the Great Hall. And they interviewed Chinese spectators, audience, aficionados, music savants afterwards. And more than a few of them said, we don't consider this to be the music of Austria or Germany or of the West. This is something that's so beautiful that strikes the human mind and human heart that we consider as part of our collective human treasure. And that's meaningful. That's meaningful, and the use of language should be embraced with that same spirit. The easiest thing would have been for those spectators would to reject it outright because it wasn't from China, but they didn't see it in that way. And language contains immense human knowledge, and language develops according to the local culture, customs, experiences, knowledge base, climates of the people. So language develops differently in different parts of the world. The Inuits up in Alaska have more than 40 words for the term snow. In English, we say snow. Then we start using other words to describe the snow. It's wet, it's grainy, it's light, it's fluffy. But they have 40 words, and those words take on a precise meaning. And so if we embrace Sanskrit as part of our collective human treasure chest, then the desire will come to understand what Sanskrit has to offer and not just try and translate it into English and think that you're always going to get the essence of the terminology. The language, the Sanskrit vocabulary is so huge. It's the language of yoga. It's the language of Eastern spirituality. It is the language of wonderful poetry and the natural world. And in English, people can say the word love. You can say, I love donuts. I love hockey games. I love my mother. I love my wife. I love the supreme entity. And I love playing hooky from school. You can see, obviously, those terms don't all have the same meaning, but the love word is used. In Sanskrit, there's about 25 different types of words for love. Is it worldly love? Is it spiritual love? Is it mundane in nature? Is it what's the intensity of that spiritual love? Is it love as friend? Is it love as more intimate companion? There's many terms. Priti, anurag, rag, there's many terms. And so rather than having to describe those words, as we become familiar with the language, we can incorporate those into our own knowledge base. And a language feels foreign at the beginning, but as we use the terms, it becomes common, and it conveys the meaning, what we wish to say. I remember one time when I have given lectures, or not lectures, but seminars on Sanskrit. And one person at the beginning, and this is a fair thing, why do we have to use Sanskrit? Why not just use English? And one of the responses, I said, okay, that's fine, you can do that. And then when you leave the house, though, just remember to tell your friend or your partner that's in the house, when they ask you where you're going, so you can tell them, oh, I'll be back in an hour, I'm just going to union class. Yoga means union, so it becomes, how far are we going to go with it? We all have embraced the term yoga around the world as yoga. People don't translate it, but that itself is a Sanskrit term that means union, of making two into one. The union that the yogis were talking about was not mind and body. Mind and body, they can move in parallel form, but they can't become one. They cannot, they'll always be two separate things. What they were talking about is unit mind and cosmic mind, where they can become one, just like water and sugar can become one. You can, once you put the sugar into the water, it dissolves. You cannot separate it. And so, so yoga has that, that's the union that the yogis were talking about. And the term yoga has that value. And no one says in the US, I'm going to union class. No one would know what you're talking about. And so if we're going to embrace the word yoga, we should embrace more and more of the terms, and it just becomes a mind expanding experience to increase our knowledge base. And it's interesting, the connections. And for that matter, no language is pure. English itself is a Germanic language. We've gotten so many words from so many other languages, from German language, and the pronunciation gets changed and moved around, but language itself is organic. They say the life of a language is about 1,000 years. Not all of them make it that long. And even within that 1,000 years, it goes through a variety of changes. So it's all in our best interest to use it, and to use it as a knowledge base. One interesting thing, someone had asked, I had done a video earlier about, someone wanted to know about Zen. What was Zen in relationship to yoga? It was actually someone's friend's brother-in-law. And so I said, okay, get him on, let's record it, and we'll do it. And we did record it. But there's an inherent connection with these early languages, like Latin and Sanskrit are brother-sister languages, both from Vedic origin. And there's a lot of lateral movement. But with this term Zen, for instance, the sixth limb of Ashtanga Yoga is known as Dhyan. It means sustained meditation. That Dhyan became Chan in China. And when it went to Korea, it became Chen. And then when it went into Japan, it became Zen. So that Zen is inherently linked with the yogic meditation principle of Dhyan. That's the language. So people were after particular ideas, and their language spread as those ideas became more cognizant working parts of that community. And the same thing is going to happen in English or in the US as the Sanskrit words come flowing in. There are terms. When my brother was visiting one of our cousins and their family, and they were talking about Sanskrit because my brother is very much involved in Sanskrit, and they said, my brother used, the cousin used the word guru. And then my brother said, you know, that's a Sanskrit word. And he said, oh, he laughed, he laughed. He didn't know where it could come from. But because now it became the custom in the US, if everyone becomes a specialty in something, they go, oh, this is the computer guru, this is the hockey guru, this is the whatever guru. And it changes the meaning of the term a little bit, but he just thought it was an English word, which it isn't. It's a Sanskrit word. In India, there are many gurus. The children have gurus for music, and they're all different types, all different levels of gurus. But in the spiritual context, the guru is not so common. And it means gu and uru. It's two different suffixes. It means to removing the darkness is what it means. To embolden the mind with light, to the one who's able to help you remove the darkness of your own mind. That's the meaning of guru. And the word in yoga, it's not taken lightly. Many people are teachers there, but guru is a different thing, and it's kind of on its own level, and that's perhaps another conversation. But the point of raising that was to let it know that that word came into English, and people just forget what was the language base of it, and that's perfectly fine. Once you gain that knowledge, you gain that word, then that's fine, and we'll embrace more and more words and meanings of words as yoga becomes more popular and as we move from more of a materialistic based society to a spiritually invested society. One of the interesting things of language, and it's really hard for us, or at least I find it intriguing for us as Westerners, because we're such a written culture. Everything is written, and we learn to spell, we memorize spelling early on. Sanskrit itself has no script. It came into fashion or to use before script came into human utility. There was no script before. Sanskrit's been used 8, 10, 12,000 years. And the script didn't come into vogue until about 4,000 years ago, something like that. So it predated script, and it never developed its own script. And it was really one of the, it was a spoken language. And in fact, in India in general, all their histories and stories were done in the oral tradition, like the Native American culture of the US, where it's just a different way of conveying knowledge, where you sit around at night and the elders convey it to the younger generations. And the stories, the whole epics of India, the Ramayana and the Mahabharata, are like that they're basically oral traditions. You can hardly find anyone in India who's read them, but they know them all. They know all the characters, the philosophy of it, because it got conveyed through story. And the word shruti, S-H-R-U-T-I in English, and in Sanskrit, means ear or listening. And there's a whole knowledge base of scripture, which is called Shruti Shastra. Shastra means scripture, which was conveyed purely orally. And the Vedas did that for thousands of years. It was conveyed, it maintained it, all those teachings purely from an oral tradition. The Vedas are the earliest forms of yogic, or you can say Indian philosophy, Indian spiritual philosophy. And those Vedas, they memorized them and they put it to music, to not like Saturday Night Fever, but within a certain type of melodic number of vowels and syllables per line. And it was easy you can always memorize a song, not so easy to memorize prose. But how many songs? I mean, advertisers know that. That's why they have a jingle with every advertisement. They want the kids to sing it and spread the word. I still can remember all those jingles from when I used to watch TV as a second grader, 45 years, 50 years ago, whatever it was. So that's how the Vedas were handed down as Shruti Shastra. All those Vedas, one generation to the next, and they'd sit in the ashram and study and memorize and sing them all day long. And that's still going on in certain ashrams in India today. Old school ashrams, they do that. And if your grandfather or your father learned 2 Vedas, then your family's name become Dviveda. And that means, and if he learned 3, then Trivedi, 3 Vedas. And if it was 4, Chatur means 4, Chaturvedi. And now throughout this India, these days, there's millions of people walking around with the last names of Trivedi, Chaturvedi. They don't know any of the Vedas. They haven't memorized any of them, but their ancestors worked hard to memorize those things, and they earned that name of how many of the Vedas that someone in that family had memorized. And that's how it came down. So we're talking about Shruti Shastra and how this oral tradition of passing on teachings. And I think we've safely made it to the point where things are no longer done just in oral tradition, or maybe they're done with the help of digital, but so many things are written out these days, but still Sanskrit has no script of its own. So in India, then everybody writes Sanskrit phonetically in their own script. The script for Hindi is Devanagari. The script for Bangla is Sriharsh. And then the South Indian languages, they have their own scripts, and it gets written that way. And then naturally, so when we write the Sanskrit words using our ABCs, it's totally off. It looks like it's representing of something, but it really isn't representing of something. And it is, but in a very what to say? It's a 3 steps away from the source, or 4 steps away from the source. And like for instance, we all practice yoga postures. And the name of the posture, the generic name for the posture in Sanskrit is asana, or sometimes it's a uchi, long a. In a lot of the Indian languages, to show that it's its own vowel sign, they'll use a capital A and a small a to show ah sound. It's its own a. In the West, we'll write it as ASANA, so it looks like it is 5 letters, but it's actually 3 letters. Ah, whole vowel sound, ah. And then 2 other letters, sa and na. And those other A's are not independent letters. They're part of the sa and the na. And they're not pronounced as, it's not asana, it's asana. It's ah and sound. Ah is the whole vowel, and all the consonants when it's written or spoken, there's an a sound, kind of like if we say so it looks to us like the word has 5 letters, but actually it has 3. And so there's a disconnect between the way we write the letters write the words in the English language, and then how they're written in the Indian scripts. And the go-between is an alphabet called the Roman Sanskrit alphabet, which can go from Devanagari Hindi into English, or Roman means our ABCs, or from the Sriharsh Bangla and into English. So and because I've done a fair bit of that transliteration, that's where I have some basic. I don't my basic understanding of Sanskrit is probably quite limited, but it's based on yogic philosophy. Years and years and years of studying yogic philosophy, you have to use those words to convey those ideas. And then with a little bit of transliteration work I've done. But a little bit goes a long way, and it's helpful. So I thought that that we can maybe look at some words that we use and go over some of those meanings. Earlier we discussed how dhyan, the Sanskrit word dhyan for sustained meditation, became Zen, and now Zen became so common, Zen Buddhism, but it came from the Sanskrit. There's a lot of words that we speak in English that are Sanskrit based, or Old Latin based, or Vedic based. And it's funny the way it changes there's a word in Sanskrit known as duhitir. And then in Latin, I believe it became duatir. And then when it came through the Germanic languages in English, it became daughter. And that's where that's D, just like son and daughter. And that's why there's an H in there. It's from Sanskrit where they used to pronounce the H, and it just got dragged all the way through until we've got, so where the daughter word, it can be traced to Sanskrit based. And same thing with mother and father. Pita in Sanskrit is father, and then pita became patra, and then it went through all you can almost watch it go across the globe from that pitri and then to the Latin, and then into all the Romance languages. It all padre, madre, it's, and then we got father, mother, but all those are, you can follow it like a river right to the source of Sanskrit based. And the Southeast Asian languages are very much Sanskrit based. And for that matter, Bengali is 90% of the words of the present day Bengali language are from Sanskrit based. So they understand a lot of the nouns. The case endings are different, but they can understand it that way. But the pronunciation became a little bit bastardized. So that happened. But we are an organic people. It's not like anything is separate. Everything is so linked in this world and in this cosmos. And language is also further proof of that how these words came across through people coming in contact with other communities and human groups. And it's just interesting to see. So I thought we would go over some terms that are commonly used in English or in our yoga practice, and see how see what their meaning might be. One of the words that's common that did get translated into English: lotus pose. So that one, the lotus hung in there. It hung in there. But I think it was Goldie Hawn wrote a book about the lotus, about her life as a lotus or something, some famous person. And I haven't read the book or seen it, but one of my yoga students, one day in class, I was explaining the meaning of lotus. And then they said, oh, now I know why they put that as the title of their book. Because the lotus term in English, like someone says lotus pose. Lotus pose is this pose. Here, I'll do a quick demo here. This is lotus pose. All right, I'll have to move my camera for a second. Here, this is. All right, when someone sits like this is lotus pose, okay? So, that word maintained itself, but it doesn't convey. People think, why would that be lotus pose? What does that have to do? Well, okay, the lotus flower, fine, but the Sanskrit words for lotus are nirej. Nir means water, and ja means birth. That water that took birth in the dirty water and rose up. And another word for Sanskrit lotus in Sanskrit is pankaj. Pank means mud, and ja means birth. That water, that flower that took birth in the mud and rose up and became blemishless. Because that's what the lotus flower does. That it grows in the dirtiest pond water you can imagine from the mud and comes up through that dirty water, and then it flowers on top of that water, and it has a special sheen on it, an oil, where the lotus flower never looks dirty. It's never like, oh, look at all the mud on the lotus flower. It's always pristine, sitting on above a muddy water. And that's what the lotus pose is all about. You're sitting in that pose, in a position where the spine is fully erect. You're living in this mundane world, this busy world, yet the mind is perfectly pure. It's maintained its sanctity. Now, the pose, it isn't magic. Okay, I can cross-leg it and now my mind is pure. The mind must engage in the meditative process to take on that purity. But from the English word lotus, there's no breakdown, or maybe there is, I don't know it. But in all the Sanskrit words, it's very clear why it became that. Pankaj, Kamala, Nirej, Padma, they all present that idea, that which grows up in the dirtiness of life and becomes something pure and unstained, untarnished. And that's where the lotus pose comes from. That the asana is because you're living this world of constant perpetual decay and transition, yet the mind has the opportunity to tap into that eternal sense of purity. And that's what one's supposed to do when they're in that pose, to meditate. And that pose helps. By sitting in that posture, the lower vrittis are the vrittis are psychic propensities. It's a Sanskrit word. That we all have different propensities that relate with different chakras. And the chakras we can also go over. But by doing that, those tendencies of mind related with the lower glands are controlled, and it's easier for the mind to come into higher thought. That you're putting pressure on those lower glands, and you're harnessing them, and they are what to say? It's easier to channelize the mind to a higher degree. They're not suppressed, but they're harnessed where the mind can then rise up. It's just like putting oneself, going to study in a library and going to study at a football game. It's going to be very difficult at a football game to study. But if you go in a library, it's much more conducive. Mind is much easier time. Same thing with their own physical body part. If you lie down, the tendency is to sleep. If you sit in the lotus pose, the mind, spine is erect and mind becomes alert. Our body posturing has an effect on the mind. So that's a little bit about the lotus and where that lotus posture comes from. And also, so in Sanskrit, we call it Padmasana. That's the word. Asana. Every yoga posture, the suffix of it is that asana. That's where that comes from. That we think of 5 letters, that is actually 3 letters. And in Hindi, someone said to me the other day in the last gathering, how come you don't pronounce the A's, especially the last one? You never say the A. Well, in Hindi, they don't say it at all. Or it's a soft sound, but never an sound. So I live with folks who are Hindi, mostly Hindi speakers, and they just end with a very gentle at the end or no sound. But all the postures have that quality of that suffix. They all come from. That's where it goes. And where we would translate that as lotus pose, lotus posture, then they would call it Padmasana. And asana, the original asana means seat for meditation, because that's what the yogis were initially doing. The yoga postures came much, 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 much later on, hundreds and maybe thousands of years later, because they found that sitting was not easy. And so then that asana literally means seat, taking your seat for meditation. Then that became the generic term for all the various postures that were developed over the time period. And so where are we? So what are some common terms in English? Jack Kerouac wrote a book called The Dharma Bums back in the 60s or something. I read that book. I can't say now I learned much about Dharma about it. But now as part of the Beat Generation. If I go back, maybe I can go back now and maybe, but there was mostly stories about drunkenness, and as I recall. But the Dharma is a Sanskrit word. And it has a few meanings. And I think in the last gathering, we talked a little bit about it. Dharma means righteousness. If you do something righteous, that you maintain your integrity. Dharma is related with morality. So if someone's a dharmic person, it means they got to do what's just in this world. Then Dharma also refers to the inherent quality of someone. Like the Dharma of the bird is to fly. That's their Dharma. That birds fly. The Dharma of the cat is to meow. That's what it does. So everything has its inherent Dharma. So it means righteousness. It also means inherent characteristic. And they say the Dharma of human beings is to realize oneself, to not run after the mundane attractions of life, but to goad the mind towards the spiritual realm. So it's a Sanskrit word, and Dharma Shastra. Dharma Shastra means the proper philosophical rendering of a teaching. given by a great guru. But that's meaning of Dharma, and I think probably around in the 1960s or so, the word started to get moved around quite a bit in the English language, and I'm not sure how they would define it, how it's used in colloquial talk sometimes. I think they basically mean righteous or they would do it that way. But Dharma also means the four qualities of Dharma, that human beings for human life, and there are four of those. The first one is known as Vistara, Vistara, and I think I talked about this in one of the other lectures I did. But it means expansion. And that expansion is not physical expansion. That the inherent quality of human beings is to expand, and we saw that in imperialism, that they wanted physical expansion. And physical expansion is going to create problems because there's a finite amount of space. And same thing now in capitalism, we see that expansion in terms of money. People accumulating more money than they could ever use in 10,000 lifetimes, but still they have desire to accumulate more. That's because the innate human dharma is to expand. They want Vistar. And if you do it in the physical world, there's going to be hell on this planet. And that's what we've seen. I'm going to take your land. I'm going to take that. And it doesn't work. What the yogis were talking about, that inherent expansion is psychic and psycho-spiritual and ultimately spiritual, where everybody can expand as much as they like, and it will never interfere on the welfare of anyone else. You can learn as much as you like. You can meditate as much as you like, and it'll only create kinship with others, and it will never impede anyone else's progress. But that Vistar, misdirected in the physical realm, is horrible. It creates for a society of haves and have-nots, and people value whoever in a degraded society, which we have in certain countries where materialism is in vogue. Those people get special status for having impeded other people's growth by overaccumulation. They think you're great because you overaccumulated. So it's all flip-flopped and wrong and backwards. That Vistar means psychic expansion, psycho-spiritual expansion. And by that, there will be human unity, not human want, means depravity. The second one is of Dharma is rasa. It means flow, that there should be proper flow of mind. That's inherent to human beings. And the third one is seva, service, that our Dharma is to serve others physically, psychically, spiritually. And as much as you help others, you'll always be more benefited, because by that expansion of mind of helping others. If you help others only for the idea of getting yourself in the newspaper or anything like that, then that's not really service. You had your own agenda. But if done in a proper spirit of the term, then it's mind expanding. You've taken on that other person's problems as your own, which is by becoming a mother's mind expanding. When as soon as someone becomes a mother in this world, the fathers don't benefit as much as the mothers do. The mothers take on the child as their own and put the child before them. And that is mind expanding for the mother. A mother will say, I'm pregnant, I'm not going to drink anymore. I'm watching for the welfare. So many things happen in motherhood. And that's why in the yogic tradition, the tantric tradition, motherhood is a veritable saintly word, because it's one of those few things in life where there's complete sacrifice for the young one, especially when the child's very young. And so in India, it's so revered, and then now it's losing itself. But even the old men will address a 6-year-old girl as mother, as respect for that, as being the mother of men. And it's because of that psychic expansion and that sense of selflessness that is inherent to motherhood. Otherwise, you can't be mother without that. It has to be. So those are, so that's a little bit about Dharma and the qualities of the Vistara, V-I-S-T-A-R-A, expansion, Rasa, R-A-S-A, flow, Seva, S-E-V-A, means service. And the outcome of that is Tatstiti, which means realization. So as you can see, if someone learns English with Dharma, there's a whole massive teaching. It's a seed point for a whole spectrum of philosophy. And a lot of the Sanskrit words are like that. And yogic philosophy is extremely developed. And it's very relevant to today's world. The yogic teachings are highly relevant to today's world, both in the economic sphere, the social sphere, the political sphere, because the yogic teachings are based on quality of mind. So they don't get old because we're still human, and those mental qualities exist. So the teachings take on a certain timeless quality because it wasn't, the yogis did not just sit at their desk and say, I wonder what philosophy I'll write. Their philosophy is born out of realization, born out of experience. Whereas a philosophy where someone came up like Marx thought, oh, I'll invent communism, that will be good. But it wasn't good. His initial feeling was pure, but the presentation of the philosophy and the application of it was a mess. It led to the destruction of human groups all over the world, especially in the second half of the 20th century. So what I'm getting at is that what's special about the yogic teachings is it was born out of understanding universal principles that exist in this world. They were not trying to create their own philosophy and then apply it to today's world, but through their realization. A classic thing is nobody invented gravity. They watched the inherent qualities of this universe, and especially on planet Earth, and it's okay, that is gravity. They didn't invent that theory. The philosophy came based on an already existing phenomena. And the yogic teachings are like that for mind and body, and that's why they don't get old. They're based on realization on what is going, the already inherently existing phenomenon in this cosmos. It's based on that. It's not something that they thought up in their own unit mind and then tried to apply to the world. It went from the source, and that's why there's no scientific method in the yogic. They didn't know that. They didn't do scientific method. They got to the source from intuition, and then they couldn't explain it, which is why it's so interesting these days that now the yogic teachings are being explained by the Western science because that's their nature to analyze through the scientific method, not from intuition. The yogis got to the conclusion first. And then they could not necessarily, they knew it was true, but they may not have been able to explain it. And that's why all the yogic postures are beautifully used in physical therapy these days. Physical therapy they were not copying the yogis per se. They were doing through scientific examination what was healthy for the back, what was healthy. And then they realized, okay, these are yoga postures. A lot of them. So it's interesting. We're getting this crossbreed now between intuitional of the East with the scientific method of the West, which looks upon truth as two different ways. The yogis got to it, the conclusion, and the scientific method's the other. So it's interesting. And so where are we with related to Sanskrit? I guess I was trying to say that the yogic philosophies, the Sanskrit words are based on a naturally occurring phenomena, the way that gravity, no one invented gravity, no one created the gravitational force. It was already occurring and they just put a name to it. And that's why it doesn't get old. That name's not going to wear out. Okay, we've been going here for a while here. Let's see. We're getting to the end of our planned hour. We can open up. I see some of you are writing. I could go on probably for another hour through this meandering way of going that I have. I just go from one. I can't say I follow an outline. I write down a whole bunch of stuff, and then whatever strikes me, and I try and go after it. But why don't we open it to some possible queries? And let me put it on. And then we can wrap up, and then we'll see how we do it. It'll go organically. So I'm going to put on gallery mode for those who want to be on screen. You can, and I'm going to invite you to unmute if you'd like to. You have the option. You can also close out. And don't worry, if no one has questions, I'll figure out a way to wrap up. So don't feel like you're putting me on the spot if no one wants to. But I saw some of you taking notes. Does anyone have any thoughts, questions, queries?
I do.
Sure, go
I do.
ahead.
I'm going for it. Well, I can't write as fast as you talk, so boy, I've got all sorts of scribble going on here. But so when you, this is kind of just for my information, I guess, just because I'm curious, but you say all these words in Sanskrit that.
Oh, this is another thing.
This is all memorized.
Wait, one thing I did. One of the first notes I had on my paper was to go over it's actually the true writing of Sanskrit is Samskrta, and M being a ung sound. So it's not Sanskrit, it's so you can write it Sanskrit, but it's going to be Sanskrit. I meant to say that at the beginning. So it's Sanskrit. And
well, I'll screw it up anyways,
Which one?
I'll mess it up anyways,
No, you're good. You're good. I know it wasn't about you. I shouldn't have even said it in that context. But if anyone needs a little hint, if you studied French, sans, sans means without. Just start with that. Sans and get it, and you got it. But you hope you were totally go. Go ahead. You go with your gusto. Let's hear it.
I did take French, 100 years ago. So that should do me some, who knows, that'll probably complicate my brain. But I was thinking that if you memorize all this stuff and you said, but it's like it's more of a verbal kind of a language, then how do you know how to write? How would you write something like that? Because and another reason kind of what ties into that is that I print out a lot of Sanskrit symbols, and I have them. I mean, I'm in the middle of packing right now, so the office is a mess, but I print out all the symbols. So is that how you would end up kind of writing if you were to write something to somebody, or I don't know. I'm just curious how that works. If it's mostly verbal language,
It is an oral language, and to this day, it still has it does not have its own script. So you are not writing Sanskrit symbols. You are writing Devanagari symbols or Bengali symbols or Sriharsh. So, and those characters, they're a yogi put together methodology. And this is what I was doing for many years, taking poetry, Sanskrit-based poetry, that was written in Bangla language and transliterating that into Roman Sanskrit, using Roman Sanskrit meaning our ABCs. And so there is a method to do that.
Okay.
Doing that. And when you do that, the word Sanskrit will never be written as Sanskrit. That's the phonetic English spelling. So naturally, everyone's going to write it phonetically. But because English is not, it can be written more functionally, phonetically in those Indian-based languages because they share a lot of the sounds.
Yeah. Well, see, because I have one of my tattoos on here.
Oh yeah.
I don't really see it very well.
Yeah.
But the kids are all, and I've got like Chinese symbols on this side, and the kids are always asking me why I have, sign language on my tattoos. It's like, well, it means, it's a symbol for, this, and
it's not just a symbol. It's probably a character, and it could be a symbol. I mean, all language is symbolization. All language is that it's symbolization of an idea. Yeah. So yeah, you're right on.
Well, trying to get them to understand. It's like, why'd you make that symbol on there, or that shape or whatever? And it's like, well, this is what it means, and that's different languages and stuff. So
that's right.
Cool. Well, you're smart for knowing all those what those symbols mean, because I have no idea.
No, I'm fortunate that a dull person like me met people who could actually get it through my brain. It took time.
Yeah, that's cool.
To do it. Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah. Any other thoughts, questions, queries, things that came up? Go ahead there, Joe.
I had something I heard that maybe you could speak to, and then a question separate from that.
Sure.
What I heard was that what was special about Sanskrit, different from other languages, is that the words in Sanskrit were based upon the energetic signature of the object. So if you wanted to name the moon in Sanskrit, they would use the energy of the moon and what that energy signal was, or signature was, that would become the word. So it's a language based more on the true nature of things than just made up words like some of the other languages are. But is that something that you know? Am I right? I don't. I heard it maybe 35 years ago.
You are correct. You are
Pardon?
correct. You are correct. And and this is something that as a humanity, we're going to have to learn. This whole universe is made up of vibration and it's sound. That's the most subtle form. And when you close your eyes and do deep meditation, you will hear that sound that you can't hear with your crude ears. And that's what Om is. Om is a sound. It's actually, we can't pronounce it with our vocal cords. Human vocal cord is completely incapable of pronouncing it. So I know sometimes people use it for the meditation, they can't do it. But that sound is the inherent sound of the cosmos when one is deeply, deeply in all the organs of the body, the eyes, ears, the sense organs, they can be projected externally or internally. Those yogis could see internally, and that's how they discovered the chakra system, which is the energetic system of the body. The mind goes two directions. It goes two directions. It goes externally out. Now in the West, or it became so infatuated with material science to a large degree of success, the way the country's organized, it worked well. Materialism is different from material science. But you're absolutely right. I don't want to go too far away from your query, Joe, but you're absolutely right. And they say that that Om sound is a conglomeration of all the 50 sounds of the Sanskrit alphabet. So it has that, and all the chakras have their own acoustic root, what the sound is of that particular chakra. And when you meditate and they're doing certain specific lessons, you're using that sound. And so the yogis did not, and those early, it's such a fantastic idea. But we are so inherently linked with this cosmos. And as a Western, and I don't mean to say East and West, because right now the East is running after materialism, maybe even faster than the West. And in certain parts of the West is far more interested in spirituality. So it's all becoming mixed up. But so I don't mean to say everyone's different. Every mind is different, but there were tendencies. And the tendencies of the Eastern world for a long time were to go inside, and those people got respect for it. And the tendencies in the Western world were to conquer externally, and they got respect for it. And there was externalization of mind and internalization of mind. But that is where that inherent connection comes. And they say all language, there are 6 stages of language, 6. And only the last 2 are physical expression, the vibration in the larynx and the sound off the tongue. And the first 4, that every idea has shape, it has internal sound, and then it comes up through so as a humanity, we have a lot to learn about who we are and what is our inherent link with this cosmos. But that was the first question of yoga. And that's what they went after with their mental power, and they got a lot of success with it. And I'm not saying they answered every question, but they came pretty darn close. But yes, the Sanskrit language has that intuitive nature. And what is that vibration, that acoustic root of that particular object, entity, just like all the chakras and singing bowl. Yeah. So yeah, that is. And then you said you had a separate question from that?
Yes, can you kind of talk about mantras?
Well, mantra is like that. Mantra means that sound which leads towards liberation. That's what it means. Man and tra. I don't want to give the derivation now, but I think that which leads to liberation is what mantra is. And they found that the vibration of certain, but it's not open sesame. It is not that you can just repeat the word and voila, you're realized. You have to inculcate that ideation. The yogis say, what's more important, ideation or mantra? And they'll say ideation. That the idea behind the mantra is more important than the mantra itself. But mantra is But the two combined are a formidable force. And people get realization that way. By meditating on that mantra and inculcating the idea. And where you're so, the mind becomes suffused with that. And there's an attraction and a pull. And you'll lose your own psychic, your own unit identity. And you become one. That's what the yogis are talking about. You lose jivatma, unit consciousness, paramatma, supreme consciousness. When you lose your own I feeling, yourself. That's what happens in meditation, true meditation. And so mantra is the bridge for that, and that's why it's that which leads to liberation. The use of, yeah. So mantra is very important, and the sounds that are helpful. Yeah. I mean, it really, mind is the next frontier. You know, people, you know, I know Alaskans will say Alaska is the next frontier, but you know, it's beyond that. It's beyond physical sphere. As human beings, the word for human being in Sanskrit is manush. Man means mind. Man. It means mind. We're psychic beings. We're not physical beings. We're psychic beings. And as each and every year goes by and each and every generation goes by, we become more mind-oriented. Our happiness is related with mind, not physical. Our happiness is not physical. It's psychic. And that's why people who are millionaires and billionaires can wake up and feel totally depressed in the morning. And look upon their wealth and say, this is nothing. I'm sick of this. You cannot get happiness through physical. It looks like it, and people won't do it. And that's where the materialism is a dead-end road. And that's why there's more psychic diseases in materialism. Every year they have to come up with new words to describe the psychic phenomena that is due to pressing the mind towards external physicality and the value system that goes along with that. So our dharma is towards psychospirituality, not physicality. All you do in this physical world is to arrange it in a way that's hospitable for everybody else. That's all we do. There's no goal. There's no greater thing you can achieve by having 55 Rolls Royces. You'll never get realization that way. Rather, you become more greedy. And then if you meet someone who has 60 Rolls Royces, you'll become totally depressed that someone has more than you do. So people ask questions, and I start running in one direction. But anyway, no, the idea that we're mind beings and that the next frontier was mind and psychospirituality and yoga and the mantra leads towards that direction.
Thank you.
Yeah. Anything else? Any other queries or thoughts while we're here? And the other thing is that as we start thinking about the mind, it's just like a scientist. Many researchers in the West got ideas. Einstein was like that. He got his theory and meditation is like that. You put the mind in a particular direction, and all of a sudden ideas start coming. Writers do that. They're creating, and then all of a sudden they're cultivating thought. Now, it depends what you're writing about, how valuable it's going to be, right? If it's trash literature, well, you know, where's it going to lead you? But if it's something meaningful, you know, Einstein was he really was contemplating the universe. He had that. He was trying to find infinite love through the cosmos. You can, however you want to think of it, but he tried to do it through science. He did. He was very remarkable thinker. But what I'm getting at is when dharana means concentration. As you think about a particular thing, it develops psychic momentum on that, and you'll get more and more ideas on it. And it creates psychic momentum. Yeah. And ultimately, that's what meditation is, generating psychic momentum purely internal towards something infinite. Yeah.
Okay, there. I could not get my microphone to unmute. I'm sorry. So the reason why I was holding up the singing bowl is that because you say that you can't, if you were meditating, you can't do, you know, the om sound yourself, but it isn't something like that similar. I mean, that's closer to, you know, the sound of the universe than our voices.
No. This happens along a continuum. when the mind is, let's say you say, you've been really busy all day. Extra, we all have jobs. We all have to take care of family. We have to do all different types of things in this world. And then when you close the eyes after being involved in all those engagements, you're not going to achieve realization unless you are some type of really phenomenal human being, which are maybe 1 or 2 of in 10 trillion. Most of us are going to, those ideas are what I was a waiter at some point, and I was like, man, they should pay me at night too, because I'm dreaming about waitering at night. I'm just serving
Right.
food to people at night. The mind takes on what you do.
Oh yeah.
So
Oh, yeah.
if you engage in that all day, it's not easy to go into pure spirituality where you close the eyes and all of a sudden all the senses are converted inwards and you're in just this experiencing extreme bliss. A lot of people don't like to meditate because when they close their eyes, all their problems come flooding into their mental sphere and they're like, this isn't any good.
Right.
So
Well,
it
and I
needs
think
to work. It needs to work through that. And the way to
Right.
work through that are various practices that goad the mind from external to internal. Kirtan, spiritual chanting, music is a wonderful helping force.
Yeah.
Again,
music
we're
is
talking about
great.
spiritual music that has ideation, and it goads the mind from external desires, which everybody has, and why everybody has it, and it's easy, and you get immediate satisfaction, which is fleeting. Your appetite is
Well,
fleeting, sexual, all those things are very fleeting. They don't not long lasting. And ultimately,
Right.
if you indulge in those things, you'll end up diseased. If you become morbidly obese, or you'll destroy your life by overindulgence and all sorts of things. There's no truth in those things. Those things have to be done with moderation. Every engagement in the physical world.
Well, and I
But
think
it's
what
easy, and it's you get quick satisfaction. So that's how people get drawn into it.
Right. Well, and I
Whereas
think when I was learning,
go ahead.
I was gonna say when I was learning, first learning about meditation and stuff like that, that's what they told me is to, with the singing bowls and things like that, to follow that sound to the silence. And that is the best way for me. I mean, even if it is all crazy, during the day, if you follow that into the silence, it's much, much easier to get there.
Yeah, music has a vibration and it has a very subtle effect on mind. And I've also used singing bowls in the classes at the end of class. And people found it. I haven't done it on Zoom because Zoom does such a poor job of conveying the sounds of music anyway. But in hand, and I have maybe 20 or 30 of them, and I've done seminars just with singing bowls because it helps get the mind to a more subtle space. But ultimately, when one is very much ensconced in meditation, any external sound will be a disturbance to that concentrated mind. Okay, you all have done well. We've gone 15 minutes over. I don't want to hold you hostage here for all the way up till midnight or to the wee hours of the morning. But it's a big topic. Sanskrit is inherently linked with yoga. It's inherently linked with philosophy of mind. And it's a fascinating language. And hopefully we'll all, write me with questions. We'll do this again. I'm sure no seminar comes out the same because I'm incapable of following an outline. Whatever, things just go, and I always do it that way. I figure that the mind should be active on the topic, and I try and have some reasonable degree of ability to stay somewhere within the realm, but invariably I go. Anyway, so we can do this again. No doubt it'll come out differently. But great to have everyone, and thanks for participating. Thanks for allowing this recording also to
Thank you.
Okay, stay well. Good.
Bye. Thank you.
Namaskar. Yeah, stay well.